the problem? Well, it hasn't been scientifically proven. And I say, well, what do you mean? I mean, there have been, documented, radar tracking situations. You have these incredibly professional, incredible witnesses who are pilots and astronauts and members of the military and government who have no incentive to ruin their careers by, starting to insist, that they've had encounters or sightings, and yet they do. And then you have, all of these other, bodies of evidence as well. So I spent a bit of time trying to unpack this with a bunch of people, and I finally figured out what the problem is. The problem is the fundamental foundation of hard science, which is based on the scientific method. So let me tell you what the scientific method requires. Okay. The scientific method requires that a phenomenon be observable, right? So that means it needs to be observable by our 5 primary senses, because those are the only senses that we recognize as being valid in the rational objective worldview, even though there are people who have what you might call sixth senses or other senses, or able to perceive, like me as an experiencer, extra dimensional realities in addition to the reality of the current dimension that we're in. The other thing about the scientific method is it demands that you are able to create experimental conditions so that a phenomenon can be evaluated empirically. So empirically basically means experimentally. Well, in order to create an experiment around something so that you can ascertain whether a phenomenon, let's say the apple falling on Newton's head in the day, finding that that is observable, that it's predictable, it will always happen the same way, that it's repeatable, that when you set up an experiment, you can run the experiment over and over and over again and always get the same results. And various other things that satisfy the scientific method. But if we can't control the experiments, we can't satisfy that hard science rational worldview. And that's the problem that I refer to as the scientific truth embargo, which is basically that there is this truth, there is this body of evidence, but that body of evidence is in Cuba, like Russell said, and there isn't anything to see in Cuba. There's nothing to see there. You don't want to go there. By the way, you're not allowed to go there, but all of this contributes to this sensibility around all of these questions of, paranormal events and, UFOs and UAPs and the crop circles and these channeled messages and people's subjective spiritual experiences, people who experience God in some way or experience angels in some way. And it's become a topic that demands ridicule, because it's become a taboo in our culture to discuss these things, because we privilege hard scientific thinking. Now, interestingly enough, if you move into realms, say, out of chemistry and biology and some of those traditional scientific silos, if you move into theoretical physics, we start working in a completely different world where they aren't able to observe quantum phenomena for the most part. They do conduct some experiments and they build, the Large Hadron Collider and, all these various technologies to sort of work on these hypotheses they've come from. But most of the knowledge in theoretical physics simply comes from math. And math is one of the universal languages. So when you start looking at crop circles and other things where there are actual messages in, these beautiful geometrical formations, there's math at their foundation. And right. That is one of the major ways that ET, or I call them ETs or extra dimensional beings, are communicating with us at this point.
Right. And people keep saying, they're waiting for, contact for communication. We've been getting messages for a long time. It's just people choose to ignore it.
People choose to ignore it because they're told to ignore it. They're told to ignore it, that it's pseudoscience, that it's unproven, that this thing or that thing has been debunked, despite all of the evidence that's come out, photographic evidence and video evidence that's come out, let's say, over the last decade, since, cameras and smartphones have become ubiquitous. We have sightings like the Dome of the Rock sighting in Jerusalem a couple of years ago. Was an amazing sighting, right? With a craft that was behaving in extremely strange ways. And there were 6 different witnesses, at least, who collected, photographic and video evidence about it. And I mean, you look at that video, you can go on YouTube now and look at it, and that craft is behaving very strangely. But because, it's possible in this day and age to Photoshop images because CG, is widely employed in Hollywood and is also possible, the skeptics just start saying, well, you could Photoshop it, so that means it's not real.
Well, and here's the thing: we're in today's society, the way technology is today. They've got to know this too, and they being whoever's keeping these secrets, that eventually they're going to have to come clean because it's only a matter of time before something happens, something's captured that cannot be denied, and I think that that's already happened. But I mean, to an extent where the entire world pays attention to it.
Well, I think what that's going to take, and it's widely rumored, and I will say that the team that I am in telepathic communication with has said this as well, that there are going to be some mass sightings coming up within the next few months that are going to make it impossible for humanity to ignore this phenomenon.
How will we know that? Because some people bring up the whole hologram thing. How are we going to know it's not some fake government-imposed deal? On top of it being the real ETs, and this is, and some people bring up that concern. Me personally, I'm going to chill out in a lounge chair and watch until whatever happens. I'm not going to run. I'm not afraid of this. I'm all for it. I want contact. I want us to know. So, but anyway,
my rule of thumb, and Russell addressed this earlier, that there are reverse engineered alien craft. My rule of thumb is that if the craft is metallic and it is clearly visible in our normal light spectrum, in our normal reality, there's a good possibility that it's actually one of ours. A lot of the beings that are basically in position but waiting for more direct interaction and indeed an intervention with humanity aren't currently in our dimensional reality. But they're very close. There's sort of like a veil. And so there's a dimension basically right next door, or a parallel universe right next door, where these beings reside. And their ships are what are called light ships. And
I've seen a light ship.
You might have seen a light ship. We do. And so we see those artifacts as they bleed across that dimensional veil. And so that's going to be the way we're going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, if a bunch of metallic ships, or even those big triangular ships like the one over Phoenix, the Phoenix Lights ship, if a bunch of those show up, then I think we could be concerned about cosmic false flag events.
I have seen a triangle. I have seen the metallic old Jetson type UFO looking thing, the flying saucer, if you will, and I've seen the light where, this one incredible one that I seen was, the light was so, it was perfect, and it was with, captured within itself. None of the light was shining on anything. It's like you had to look up to see it, but it was incredible. But it looked like it was all energy, like all light.
Yeah, no, the light ships require a tremendous amount of free energy. It's essentially 0 point energy.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, in order to be able to shine that brightly. And so, that's sort of my rule of thumb. I'm also, very intuitive, and this group, the Galactic Federation of Light, they're very, very sensitive about humanity's state of consciousness, and they're very concerned about causing mass panic, which is why for the last 20 years or so, at least in earnest, they have been in the midst of this ongoing awareness campaign, which involves all of these sightings, which involves all of these channeled messages, which involves all of these crop formations. They're trying to say, and they have been for quite some time, trying to say, look, we're here, we're benevolent, we're not going to be aggressive, we're not going to be, like coming out like the silverback gorilla, banging our chest, right? That's not our way. We're advanced spiritually, we're compassionate, we're, highly collaborative, and we care about humanity, and we want humanity to know that.
Let me.
So can I just jump in here for a second?
Sure. Go ahead.
Sure. So, and this is to piggyback off of Lisa's statement before about her rule of thumb with, maybe we'll have this hoaxed alien invasion. Look, here's the deal. The Pentagon wants this out. Proof positive, done. Right. You had said earlier in when we came back from the advertisements that you like getting involved with, understanding the leaks and the emails, and it kind of alludes to the fact that there's ET here. Yes, it does. But what it also alludes to the fact is that there is a growing body of evidence in the Pentagon that says we want this out. We just don't know how to do it. Help us. They are appealing to the public for help. It goes back to my thing with James Fox. The public needs to get up and activate and get their minds together. Only then can the media act on this. Now, one thing your viewers don't know here is that I had the privilege of being in communication with three, and of those three, I met one. All three of them were Pulitzer Prize winning journalists from the New York Times. I met one last year, November 30th, after Thanksgiving, in the New York Times building for half an hour. He asked me to bring convincing evidence. I did. I showed him all the documents that I had available on the Rockefeller Initiative. He was convinced after that 30 minutes. And after that 30 minutes, he then had an hour-long follow-up call with many more questions. He has since disappeared. And I don't mean physically, I mean he has cut off communication. And this is a very hardened and very accomplished journalist. It's been there for 20, 25 years. The other two, one of them is female. I'm not going to mention names, but out of context, you can probably guess who it might be, has told me that when Podesta tweeted, she tried to get an interview with him, and he rejected the interview. And she went about it the wrong way. She should have interviewed Clinton and not Podesta, because that was the whole point of Podesta's tweets. And the third person, who is now retired from the New York Times, is very much interested in this subject, but cannot devote time to writing about the disclosure movement because he's in the process of writing and releasing a book about John Mack, which is also phenomenal, and John Mack is another whole story. But my plea here to everybody, every one of your listeners, please, if you think disclosure is important and you come on these radio shows to listen about this and want to delve into it, I urge you to get up and start activating. Not that you aren't, but we need you to do it, because only then can the public pressure the press, and the press can get to the Pentagon. Now, I know we have got people that want some questions. I just want to make note of this. Where the disclosure activists are going from here. As many as you may know, Steve Bassett of PRG is sort of pulling up the PRG U.S. stakes temporarily and devoting and redirecting his strategies to Europe. So he's renamed it PRG International. That's a problem in the sense that leaves a void of activist groups here in the United States. And I'm not talking MUFONs and different UFO groups. I'm talking about pure activism, something where we are toying with the idea of actually creating a march on Washington for disclosure, something that's never been done before, ever. And it should have been done a long time ago. And what we're trying to do is fill that void and augment and complement the work that Steve has done and left behind for everybody, what he will continue to do. So we have formed that group to complement his actions. What we're going to do is take a very strict journalist-based strategy to achieve a more open national discourse, if you will, in the U.S. and internationally among the mainstream media about the UFO ET matter. And there's another thing here, Michael. There's a lot of disparate groups in this country that need to come together and have a unified voice, and that's something else we're going to advocate for. We are talking to some people from Edgar Mitchell's foundation, Free. We're talking to some other groups as well to try and append and aggregate all of the groups together. So I would ask everybody, please, if you're listening, go to our website, which is up and running thanks to Dr. Galarno. It's www.disclosureactivists.org. You will find a plethora of evidence and articles written by some of the members in our group, as well as Dr. Lisa Galarno. You will find out a little bit about how to join the movement. There's a press and media page on there. There's also a link to our petition and GoFundMe page. And, it's certainly to ask people for money sometimes to do things when there's no guaranteed outcome, because obviously I can't guarantee disclosure, is sometimes very awkward and uncomfortable to do it, but I have to do it. It's part of our mission. Those funds will help us with press kits, press releases on the PR web, group calls to organize our efforts, keep our logo on our website up and running. So whether it's $1, whether it's $10, whatever people feel comfortable with, if you can donate, please do. If not, it's all good. We're still going to work this together. But that's really where I'm coming from in my advocacy movement. I know and I feel in my heart, and I am convinced that the Pentagon is crying for help. They are needing us to do this. They want to get this out. They don't want to get caught with their pants down, as Lisa mentioned before. Tons of countries have already disclosed on a soft disclosure basis. What's going to cause Putin or Xi Jinping in China to not do it? We don't know. The U.S. does not want to get caught like this, and that's why they're making strategies now to get this out, and they are indirectly and very subtly asking for our help, and we need to get this done.
Well, yeah. And what about other countries? Speaking of that, won't they all have to kind of come together? At least the powerhouses come together and come to an agreement. I mean, because if one puts it all out there, then that's kind of leaving the others to I don't know.
Well, for some reason, so that's a good point. The way I see it, Michael, is disclosure is by far a global issue. It's not a United States issue. Now, some people will argue that the United States are heading up this embargo, and that may be true because we've had crashes in Roswell and we've hit this ever since, but other countries are getting and growing impatient. And if the U.S. does it first, that'll give credence to every other country to then come out and say, yes, by the way, based off national, whatever story they want to give, I don't really care about. What our goal is to get to that damn podium in the East Wing, West Wing, whatever you want to call it, and say, ladies and gentlemen, because of national security, we had to hide this from you, but we are here tonight to tell you, yes, it's true. There are ETs here. And then whatever comes after that, Michael, because the ET subject matter has boatloads of information.
That would be an amazing night, I tell you what.
and they're going to do it, and they want to do it, but we need to push them to do it. Otherwise, if we're going to sit around and twiddle our thumbs, it gives no reason the Pentagon to do anything. Right?
Yeah,
just sit back and just.
I wish that all these people, for the last few years now, all these people have gone on the streets and they've protested so much stuff. I wish people would get together like that and make noise about, getting the truth out in this sense. I mean,
could you imagine if 100,000 people could be from different countries descended on Washington, D.C. and demanded disclosure? What kind of press coverage? Those are the type of things that we need to get done in this group. And we just started. We're picking up the pieces. We've been open for a few weeks, so we're getting a lot of stuff done. But that is a perfect point. People need to get up and whether it's gay rights, women rights, it doesn't make a difference. These are notable causes. People are protesting for it, and I appreciate and respect that. But this situation here, disclosure, people sometimes don't understand that once disclosure happens, it will change profoundly everything on this planet. It's an old paradigm that we live in that's just about to collapse. And though I believe and convinced that the world is ready for change, they've been ready for a long time. They're tired of the bullshit that's been going on. And disclosure will only serve to progress us amongst humanity in our quest of discovering who we are as a species and who our, let's just call them brothers and sisters out there, are. So it's a profound issue that shakes the core of every living thing on this planet. And I could, I don't know if you're familiar with Sir David Attenborough. I love the guy.
No.
And he just did Planet Earth 2. It's a documentary everybody should see, and it gives you appreciation for our planet. But he says a quote, and he says, we should be it's our responsibility to make this planet not just a home for us, but a home for all life on Earth. This is our home, and we're killing it. And the only way to repair the damage that we've done is to meet beings from another world, which will unify us undoubtedly, and we'll be able to move on and quest amongst the stars. So that is my hope here. I can't force people to do anything, but disclosure has to be a forced issue at this point. And if people don't want it, it's never going to happen unless there's some massive sighting, like Lisa had mentioned before. Otherwise, we need to get up and we need to take this to the next level in the right way.
Yeah,
which is what we're trying to do.
Oh, go ahead.
Russell, I want to build on that just a tiny bit. We talk about sort of the pre-disclosure world and the post-disclosure world, and I spend a lot of time, because I'm a futurist, thinking about the post-disclosure world. And, what it really does is it opens the door to us being able to receive mentorship and guidance from civilizations that are much more advanced than ours, civilizations who have figured out how to deal with the problems that we find intractable. And when earlier, Michael, you were talking about politics and these sorts of things, we really do need to be able to rise up, above those kind of traditional silos of belief. As an anthropologist, I'm very aware that humans, all of us, are much more similar than we are different. We all love the same. We fear the same. We care about the same sorts of things. We all want humanity to do better. We all want to create a better future for our children. And we all want to make sure that our planet is, alive and thriving. And we already know, because of a lot of the technological advances that have come, to us in the last, 70 years or so, including things like the integrated circuits and, silicon chips and computers and the internet and all of those kinds of things. A lot of that technology has been inspired by recovered craft and other suppressed technologies. So, when we think about our galactic brothers and sisters, if you will, some of those civilizations are advanced thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, even more beyond our current capability. And my sense is that at this time, our planet desperately needs an intervention. We need to be able to get away, for instance, from scarcity thinking. We need technologies that allow us to scale our efforts, that allow us to, feed everyone, give everyone water, potentially terraform parts of our planet that aren't hospitable to life, to deal with climate issues, any of these things. And that's what I really look forward to when I think about us finally engaging in open contact with some of these benevolent beings who are on our doorstep, but, aren't trying to break the door down because they don't want to freak us out.
Right. Right, and again, we could accomplish so much if we would stop focusing on all the things we don't agree on, and get to some of these things we do agree. I don't know if there might be maybe a handful of human beings on this planet who don't care, but I think most people would like to know if we got brothers and sisters out there, and we'd like to know where we come from. I've said it before. I don't care if I find out Mickey Mouse created me. I just want to know. So and I think that's the first step to getting closer to who we really are, is by making that contact and being able to. I mean, think of the technology that would open up for, and I mean, there's so much good that would come out of this. There's also the small chance, I guess, of something bad coming out of it, but I'm willing to take that risk. I mean,
they would have done it by now if they.
I think so too.
They absolutely would have done it by now. Absolutely.
I would think so too, honestly. And it's like, at this stage of the game, whether they kill us or we kill ourselves, either way, we're on our way out. So we better.
But you make a good point. You make a valid point, Michael. You said that if everyone just gets up and does something, I can bet you money. I'm willing, and I'm not a big gambler, but I will bet you money that we have a petition out there that I alluded to before. So if you get a chance, please.
And I signed that today, as a matter of fact, and I shared it.
Well, we have absolutely, from the bottom of our hearts, appreciate that. But here's the thing: there's 330 million Americans in this country. I will place bets that at the very core basis, at least 1 million of those 330 million Americans are convinced of an ET presence. Those million people should be signing a petition, which takes them 30 seconds. Game over. That's it. Petition goes to the White House. It's up on the White House. It's on Change Around the World. These are the things that we need to think about 2 minutes out of our day to say, you know what? There are people that get, and I'm not singling anybody out, one person, but I tend to get lazy sometimes. That I will admit. People tend to think, well, if disclosure would have happened, it would have happened. That's the wrong attitude to have. It will happen, and we just need to show them that we want it.
That's right. I'm getting this petition now. I'm going to put it in both of our chat rooms as well, a link for it, so people go sign it, pass it around. That's how these things get done. It takes everybody. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I want to give you got some questions here from the chat room as well. And folks, I should tell you, I've tried to take calls tonight. Skype, again, is giving me issues, so it's not letting me add anybody to the call. I would actually have to call you. If you want to private message me and say, hey, I'm trying to call you, here's my area code, ring me back, I'll do it, all right? But
this is why we need ET technology.
We do. I'll tell you what, because Microsoft technology's gotten pretty bad here for us. But we're working on a new phone system, so things will be right here probably by next week. But here's a question. This one comes from Richard. It says, I would like to ask Lisa what she knows about the Andromeda Council and the supposed transformational shift that is coming. Do you know anything about that?
I do know a lot about that.
Okay.
So I have been studying, if you will, the transmissions from the Galactic Federation of Light for quite some time. And one of the organizations that crops up frequently is the Andromeda Council, and also various other high councils from other groups that are part of this coalition. The high councils tend to be the organizations, you could sort of call them like our UN, if you will, who are sort of the leadership groups. And a lot of them are engaged in this ongoing awareness effort. So if that's something that any of your listeners are interested in, I would definitely recommend them searching for the Galactic Federation of Light, and they will see that not only are there various extraterrestrial beings and various councils and these sorts of things, but they will also find ascended masters. They will find messages from archangels and other beings from the angelic realms. You only have to listen to one or two of them or read a couple of them, and you can feel palpably how positive their intentions are, and how determined they are to help us develop, in a way that you might call spiritually, in order to raise, the collective consciousness on our planet, so that we can do what we were saying earlier, which is to, rise above these different belief systems and, rise above the demands of different organizations and individuals who say, this is what you need to believe. This is very much a situation where you have to become determined to know the truth. And it's also the sort of truth that you don't always get just looking at from one point of view. So I believe in triangulation, which means, that I try to look at a phenomenon like this from all sorts of points of view. And I've been on a journey now, as you know, going back to childhood. I went to Christian schools when I was a kid, and I've done all sorts of other things as well. I'm a bit of a Buddhist, I'm pretty much agnostic, when it comes to, creation and those sorts of things. But I absolutely believe that our cosmos is architected, and that there's design thinking, if you will, behind the way our realities manifest themselves. So hopefully that answers their question.
All right, and BTOS, he says, what does your guests feel about these orange orbs? What do they represent? I mean, they're craft, I guess, right?
Well, a lot of the orbs are what you might call reconnaissance vehicles or probes. So the orbs aren't typically manned. They're dispatched from other ships, which are, like I was explaining before, extra-dimensional in nature. So the light orb that we see is, again, sort of a holographic projection into our reality. So all we're able to see is the light. We're not able to see a physical craft or anything like that.
Okay, and it's another question. I would like to ask this of your guest. The reality of all this is that I am also a contactee. I have been told, meaning our ET friends, when they are ready to disclose to us, they will. What are your guest thoughts?
Good question. I am not an experiencer. I've never seen a UFO in my life. I hold high respect for contactees and experiencers. Hell, I'd like to have an experience at some point. My answer to that question is I think they already have disclosed themselves to us. I think contactees and experiencers don't need confirmation since they've been disclosed to. I think as citizens of a country, as citizens of the world, we have to look up to a governing body, right? Because that's just how society runs. There's always governance. So we look to and try to trust the government. And when some government is holding secrets like this, I think people look to them to say, tell us the truth. Again, I've never experienced anything. It's my take on this is that they have disclosed themselves. Many people have seen them before.
And just to throw it in there, I wonder why some of us see these things and then others do not. And it's, I wondered who is keeping it secret, because it would seem like if they really want us to know, they could just, I guess they have, though. They have been in our skies.
No, Michael, they absolutely have. This awareness campaign goes back to the 80s. There was even a broadcast in the UK in the early 80s, I think it was, that was interrupted by an ET transmission. Where they basically broke straight into the airwaves and, spent a couple minutes talking about who they were and, why they were here and what it's a concern of. So I'll dig that up and send it to you.
Oh, please. I'd love to take a look at that. I
actually beg to differ and say that they actually have been revealing themselves openly since the ancient times, actually.
Well, you're right about that, right? But some of those groups were different groups than the groups that are currently engaged with us. But absolutely, they've been revealing themselves. This is how, civilizations in the middle of the desert in the Middle East suddenly, if you look at the historical record, developed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, engineering, architecture, all of these kinds of things that hunter-gatherer tribes don't aspire to. If you look at the number of, tribes that still exist, say in the Amazon in South America, for the most part, human beings, as long as they're feeding themselves, and everyone's comfortable, they don't aspire to building megalithic monuments like the pyramids, so there has clearly been this inspiration and this guidance and mentorship throughout Earth history, which my contacts have told me is very typical, that their civilizations were mentored and guided. And, we often hear about Star Trek's Prime Directive, for instance, and a lot of us assume, or a lot of people will say, well, ET must not be interested in us because we're just way too stupid or we're way too violent or, all of these reasons why ET wouldn't care about us. other than
But
potentially wanting to exploit us.
But
But
look at it this way, though. For those people, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, if we were exploring, say, if we sent a probe around Mars and we seen a cat walking on the planet, as much as we know it's not the most intelligent thing in the universe, we would still have an interest in it. I certainly would.
Right. No, I mean, scientists are a universal phenomenon, and so there's a science interest, but I would say beyond that, there's a humanitarian interest. A lot of these extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional species, they're humanoid in nature. They consider themselves humans, not Homo sapiens, but, we all have the same divine spark within us, and so we are as similar to our extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional brethren and sisters, just as much as we humans on this planet are connected to one another in, very fundamental ways. So, their agenda, if you want to call it that, is very much, humanitarian in nature. They want to help us, but they don't want to take this potential powder keg, right?
Yeah.
If you want to call it that, which is our current, world culture, which is dominated by military industrial complexes and people concerned about violations of their airspace. They're trying to learn our culture and learn how to engage with us in the most appropriate ways, but they absolutely are doing it already. They've disclosed to, tens of thousands of at least, possibly more worldwide, experiencers and contactees who, as Russell said, we don't need to be convinced because we've been disclosed to already by ET themselves. But, they are shocked, frankly. I mean, the beings that I speak with, talk about things like the crop formations and the sightings and the channeled messages, and they say, we can't believe that this isn't huge news on your world. Like, how is that possible?
It's because you're dealing with the media. That's
right. That's right. Look at our planet. It's like a time bomb. You had mentioned
comedy show.
Well, yeah, you've got gas lines going through all the planet, oil lines, nuclear power plants. I mean, it's like somebody wired it up to blow. It's crazy. But so
that's why disclosure is that's exactly why disclosure is a political and legal issue. Think about this. You have all these technologies locked up, and Ben Rich of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works said this, I think, to an audience at UCLA one time. He said, we have technology to get ET home, but in order to get those technologies released, it would take an act of God. Could you imagine having anti-gravitical craft since the 40s, and we are still putting on this show of sending people into space with the Russians on a shuttle?
That's criminal.
I mean, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal, and that is the when Trump said healing energies from a pharmaceutical perspective and technologies of tomorrow. I mean, we're talking some mind-blowing technologies, healing technologies. Stephen Greer talks about it being a $6 trillion problem, and I happen to agree with that. Lots of lawsuits, lots of reparations that will happen, but you know what? I don't really care. It doesn't make a difference. All of that can get sorted out in a post-disclosure world.
Yeah. Okay. And here's another question. Ask if the guests believe the reptilians might be elves or Neanderthals. This is a serious question, believe it or not. Just put it out there.
I am not
You're
going
not
to
being
touch that
mocked.
question because I don't have any.
I will answer. Okay, so as the anthropologist, one of the things that we learn physical anthropology. We learn the fossil record. We learn all about proto-hominids and, how we descended from our forebears. We did not actually descend from apes, but we are cousins. We share about 99.5% of our DNA with chimpanzees, for instance, who are our closest, cousins. Mm-hmm. Neanderthals were on a slightly offshoot line as Homo sapiens, which developed a little bit later. But there definitely was some interspecies mingling, right? So a lot of us probably have a bit of Neanderthal in us. You
can see it in people. Some people you really can. You really can. I mean, you could see some resemblance in there.
Some more than others, I guess you could say. Although the Neanderthals aren't all that well understood. They were actually quite spiritual beings, and a lot of the sites that they've uncovered are grave sites, and they've found that much like the Egyptians did, the Neanderthals were clearly trying to prepare their dead for their journey, to the other side, and they would leave artifacts and, obviously had a lot of concern about what would happen to, one of their fellow Neanderthals when they happen to die. So they're actually more interesting than we might think. And there were other sort of proto-hominids well before the Neanderthal beings, going back, to Ethiopia 4 million years ago. There's a species called the Australopithecines that are very well documented. And they were also bipedal and walked upright, much like we do, but they're the first kind of major connection we see between the sort of knuckle walking other primates and our species. So as far as leprechauns go, I'm not sure, but I do know that there are elemental species as well. There are fairies and various other types of beings. Even if you just look at the extraterrestrials and extradimensionals, there's quite a spectrum. Some of them are very short, some of them are very tall, and just about everything in between. And the reptilians have been a factor. The Greys were actually working for the reptilians for quite some time. The Greys are sort of bioengineered, sort of android species, if you like. And a lot of those forces have been sort of cleared out at this point. And so there's definitely much, much less activity from what we might call the negative ETs.
All right. And I'm going to give you a couple more questions here, and then we'll take our last break. Then I'll come back, give you a couple more questions, and we'll finish up here tonight. Chris asks if I could ask the guest what is going on in Antarctica.
Ooh, I love Antarctica.
A lot of activity going on there, yeah.
So Antarctica is a very, and I'm not an expert on Antarctica, but from what I understand, Antarctica used to be more tropical. And I go back to the Piri Reis map years and years and years ago. And I believe, so I'm not convinced here, but I believe that some kind of civilization, I know David Wilcock and Corey Good happen to talk about this sometimes. I'm not a huge follower of theirs, but I tend to check in from time to time, that what I find very interesting here is that there's not supposed to be anything really in Antarctica. It's a frozen over wasteland, right? We have some posts out there. However, John Kerry and Buzz Aldrin both just went to go visit Antarctica. Now, I doubt they hopped off a plane and went skiing. I think they went to go see something that's being excavated there. I think we're going to hear something about that at some point this year, although I cannot be for sure. And it could be part of what WikiLeaks is talking about with this new thing they have called Vault 7 that has been tweeted over the last 48 hours or maybe even the last couple of days about Vault 7. But I'm not going to touch that on this particular show. I just don't want to lose the focus on that. Okay,
fine. And another question here before the break. Robert asks, what do you both think about Gary McKinnon's disclosure about hacking NASA? And I'll add to that, I spoke to him myself, and he's promised me at some point in the future he'll come on the show. But he says that when he got in, when he hacked, he's seen evidence of non-human security forces of some sort. I forget exactly how he worded it. I'm paraphrasing. But anyways, what do you think about his disclosure?
It was disclosure. McKinnon found information in NASA files. Now, again, NASA, just to put it out there, they're not a civilian space agency.
I know.
You see, NASA's directly under the auspices of the Department of Defense, so anything that comes into NASA gets cleaned up and cauterized by the folks at the DoD. So let's just start there. But McKinnon absolutely hacked in. He found files of non-terrestrial space officers. It's basically talking about what we call the secret space program, which absolutely undoubtedly exists.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's part of Tom DeLonge's narrative in his book Secret Machines, such as the TR-3B and these anti-gravitic craft. And what's interesting about that is they tried to silence Gary McKinnon by almost extraditing him to the United States and throw him in Guantanamo for 7 years, and that surely would have shut him up.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. And so that was kind of an applaud to Gary for that. But absolutely, it's my assessment that he absolutely did hack in and find some really, really mind-blowing files.
He also said that he had found files that indicated the Navy had its own fleet out in space.
Yeah, that's a good possibility, Michael. I am more, when I think about it, and Lisa certainly was in the military. I've got military background from a familial standpoint in terms of, again, my step-grandfather. But I think the Navy actually runs the show. Yeah. When it actually comes to a lot of the departments, whether it's Air Force, Navy, Army, I think Navy holds a lot more secrets than Army and Air Force do. And at least that's what I've been told by different sources. So it is quite possible that certain people in the Navy have crafts, and certain people in the Air Force might have different types of crafts. It's a very highly compartmentalized issue, and we just need to decompartmentalize it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, listen, hold on, both of you. We're going to take this last break, and then we're going to come back and talk some more. And folks, I am so sorry that Skype has disabled us somehow from being able to take the calls. I mean, I got a paid account. We've been through all this. But rather than wait for them to give me a green light, we're going ahead. We're getting the equipment we need so that we can hook up landline phones. We'll be all set, I think, by next week, where we won't have this problem anymore, where Skype decides what nights I can take calls and what nights I can't, right? Not good. We love the call-ins. We love hearing from all of you, even those of you who don't agree with everything. I mean, we want to hear from you too, but unfortunately, you're going to have to do it by chat tonight if you want to get through. So my guest, Russ Kalka, and I've got Dr. G with me as well for lack of pronunciation. And they're linked up on my website. Their website is www.disclosureactivist.org. Again, linked up on the homepage. Also, that's right in our picture slider. You'll see a photo of the disclosure activist. Click on that. It'll take you right over to their website. Make sure you sign the petition as well. And our good friend Tony, I hope you get better soon. The poor guy's, I don't know what he's doing, skiing off buildings or something, but he broke his leg. This guy. Come on now. Get yourself better and no jumping off buildings. We'll be back, folks. This is Late Night in the Middle. Get back to some questions. My guest, they're going to be with us for just a little longer here. Russ Kalka and Dr. Lisa G with us. And so let's get back to it. And let's get some questions answered here. All right. So we've got another question. We've got a few questions here. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Antarctica. All right. Can you ask your guests what they think about Project Bluebeam? What's your thoughts on that quickly?
I don't buy it. I think that was a fear-mongering way to keep this hidden. I've heard stories of Carol Rosin, who spoke to Werner von Braun, who was brought here through Operation Paperclip, that they were going to use as their last resort, sort of a hoaxed alien invasion to create this new world order, if you will. I don't buy it. I think the old paradigm, the old cabal, if you will, I love that term, is coming to an end. And again, all of this is related to consciousness. The world is waking up. Maybe not so much the United States yet. Hopefully they will. But the rest of the world and people within this country are waking up to the fact that there's a lot of BS out there, and they're sick and tired of it. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
I'm with you. All right. Liz asks, why don't the ETs handle the disclosure? Why does it have to be our government? Why a march on Washington?
I will let Lisa answer part of that question. Okay. I think a lot of it does have to do with the Prime Directive. They don't want to influence our politics. They don't want to influence the way we govern. They do show themselves and make themselves aware that there's a higher reality out there. To Liz's question, a march on Washington, if you want to appeal to the right crowd in Washington, gathering the troops down there and expressing your beliefs and expressing your energy and expressing your thoughts on that disclosure must happen, that is part and parcel to sort of what the disclosure activist movement, this grassroots movement, if you will, is all about. It's about creating that unified vision, that unified voice, bringing the disparate systems, the disparate groups together. Look, at the end of the day, and Liz, I hope this answers your question, everybody that is into these subjects all want the exact same thing. Some of us may disagree on certain things, some of us may not, but in the end, we all want the same outcome. That outcome is disclosure. And the only way to get disclosure done is to make your voice heard.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that, Russell. I'm going to give a slightly more technical explanation.
Please do.
One of the things that, you and I have both spoken about during this show is, the issue of consciousness. And consciousness is an issue both from the perspective of humanity being prepared for these monumental changes that are coming, but also it's a technical thing. So I've mentioned that most of the benevolent extraterrestrials are actually extra-dimensional in nature. And we are currently in the process, our planet, of raising our planetary vibration to a frequency that allows us to interface with these extra dimensional beings. So, a big part of the process that they've been undergoing is to encourage our individual spiritual development to help us individually raise our own frequencies, making suggestions about things like how to open your pineal gland, so that, the energy, from the cosmos and, from, potentially other dimensions are able to reach us. It's actually been a technical limitation for them that they haven't been able to show themselves more widely. It's the reason why we don't have craft landing and extra dimensional beings, coming out of those craft. We sort of have to meet in the middle. So, they are doing all sorts of things to attenuate their specific vibrations to become more compatible with our vibrations, but we need to do so at the same time. So in terms of, why don't they just disclose themselves? That's up, until this time at least, has been the major limitation. We also need to have the sanction of, some world governments or some world entities. So our petition, if you look at it, you will see it's addressed to the United Nations, and it's also addressed to 49 other world leaders, various organizations, press, and media, because those are the kinds of organizations that they need to be able to reach out to directly. I'll make a little bit of a plug for anybody who's interested in this. There's a mockumentary that you can find on Hulu. It's called The Visit. And what it is it's essentially a simulation of ET showing up and having a conversation with organizations like the UN and, other, astrophysicists and different sorts of people who might have those initial first contact conversations. And that's kind of an interesting thought experiment about how it might go. Although I will tell you, it's called The Visit, that in that particular case, that ET group opted, after having a long conversation about humanity, opted to leave. And that's not actually what's happening. I mean, they are incredibly committed to this process. They see the situation on our planet, to use, a bit of hyperbole perhaps, but, they see it as a Holocaust. There are so many people on this planet who, suffer in misery from, preventable illness, from malnutrition and, other scourges of poverty. And they know that it's their responsibility as advanced species themselves to help us get to that next level. So it's really going to be a quantum leap for humanity, but there are a bunch of pieces in play that need to come together in a particular way for us to get the message we need to get, and to get the offer of help that we need to get, and to have our world governments accept that help.
All right. And Widget wants to know, Widget says people have seen it with their own eyes, so why keep begging the government to acknowledge what you have seen? And I could even probably answer that one, but it's for you guys. So what do you think? I mean, why keep pressing the government when we already, basically, some of us have disclosure? I don't think that's good enough, is it?
It's a good question from Widgets. We're not trying to convince anybody at all about anything. What we're trying to do is say, look, we're not appealing to the people. Well, we're sort of appealing to the people that have seen the craft, right? We need their help to get this out. But there's also a lot of people out there that don't know about it at all. And a lot of people look to their government for a source of information. People are glued to their TV sets nonstop, programmed, if you will, by CNN, Comedy News Network, and Fox News. And again, it goes back to everyone is governed by something, right? Yeah. Governed by the law, governed by society. We are governed by our government and military intelligence. And we look to them who hold the secrets to come out and say, you are all right. What you have seen actually is this XYZ. And then I think everybody in the world, when all the governments come together to say it, will create that unified experience to allow us to get to that next step in our evolutionary process, is the best way I could describe it.
No, you're right, Russell. And what it is, I mean, there are projects that need to start. This is kind of like the Red Cross showing up when, Haiti gets hit by a hurricane. Yeah. It is a humanitarian disaster as far as they're concerned. And they want to be able to get on the ground. They want to be able to start offering us these technologies. They want to start offering their guidance and experience, in order to clean up the planet, clean up the oceans, deal with, climate issues, all of these sorts of things. But in order to be able to get on the ground and start helping us, humanity as a whole, versus simply working with individuals, they need that government sanction. Either a world government or perhaps several of our major governments.
Yeah, open contact will true open contact with the citizens of this planet will not happen until disclosure happens. We have to tell everyone they're there, officially speaking. Then we can hash out all the other details after that, and that would take years.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's important that it's disclosed by the governments as well, because it's going to be difficult to move forward with any of this until it's recognized by everybody. I mean, otherwise we're going to constantly be stuck in this debate. Oh, they're here. No, they're not. That was a UFO. No, it wasn't. And so, if we get it all out in the open, there's no more debating whether we're alone or not. We could put that one away now, and we can move on and answer more questions. That's how I see it.
That's very well. That's correct, Michael. That's very well said.
Yeah. So Cortex asks a question for the guest. Where do you believe the human race originated from? Was it an ET intervention or not? And how does this go hand in hand with the idea of a divine creator, if you believe?
That sounds like a question for me.
All right.
I was actually going to say I could take the first part, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, so I mentioned before when we were talking about this that, although I'm scientifically minded, I believe in evolution, all of these kinds of things. I do believe that our cosmos and our universe are architected. I think there's a process of ongoing tweaking. That becomes very clear when you start to really dig in, to the science behind our existence. The probability of our existence just randomly happening is extremely small. If you look at things like, just the mathematics behind gravitation, and the fact that if you had the smallest deviation, from those particular constructs, we couldn't exist. It just wouldn't work. So, there are things like that, when you really dive in and you start to consider these things, especially if you're someone who's familiar with principles of design and design thinking, it becomes very clear that we live in a designed reality. Now, I don't think that means that there are beings that are involved in each and every decision, about, for instance, do I become pregnant this month or do I not? But those systems are definitely put in place and are absolutely architected. As far as our development as humans, like I was talking about before, if you look at sort of, other primates that exist on our planet at this time, they don't tend to evolve, very much further than living in small tribal communities. If they use any tools at all, it's extremely rare. They have their own sort of systems of gestures and sounds that they make that are, sort of a language. But even honeybees have a sort of language and communicate, with one another in particular ways. But it is very clear to me, based on what I know about the human fossil record, that we were absolutely engineered, to become the beings that we are now. Homo sapiens sapiens is the name of our species. And, I also happen to know that there were a number of master geneticists from various ET extra-dimensional species, if you want to call them that, who contributed DNA to the genome that was created that resulted in us. So the one thing that surprises a lot of people, who have been told that aliens are little green men or have been exposed to grays or reptilians, is the fact that a large percentage of extraterrestrial / extra-dimensional beings are humanoid, just like us. They look very much like we do, and so we look more like them, in fact, than we look like our other primate cousins, who are in existence on our planet at this time.
Right. All right. I think that we might have maybe one more question here. I don't know. I'm looking now. Steve Bassett has tried this for the last 20 years, but nothing has happened yet. Do you think you can bring disclosure? And that will be the final question, and I'll give you both the floor to get out anything you'd like after that.
I love that question. Yes, he has. I respect Steve Bassett very dearly. I've communicated him with many times. He's actually in full support of what we're doing as he goes off to Europe. Steve, I think, has focused a lot in his career on the Rockefeller Initiative and focusing on the Clintons and focusing on politicians in Congress. While that was good, all said and good, and that was the bait. I am confident that what we need to do is pound away at the media, and I don't mean just the institutions like the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm talking about the corporate news, the alternative news. I don't care to go after politicians. That isn't our petition. It's still important. We're taking this, like I said, we are augmenting and complementing what Steve has done in a more robust fashion. My goal here is to our mission statement from the Disclosure Activists is through ideation, creation, and collaboration. And I don't mean it's just going to be the two of us doing this. We're trying to bring in everybody in the group to get together and band together and do this. Again, I'm not going to guarantee disclosure. I think we're going to be very good at what we do and sure as hell get to the next step if we don't get disclosure. We know the Pentagon wants it. We're going to try and get there. So anything can help. So that's where we are. And again, guys like Bassett and Cameron and Victor Vigiani all definitely support this cause. And we're going to just truck on from here. Please, if you want to join the movement, you can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, a Facebook group. We've got the website up and running with videos and press releases and all the good stuff there. So we welcome your support, and we're going to do the best damn job we can possibly do to educate and get this out.
All right. Yeah. I was going to say, Doctor, you're next.
Okay. Well, just building upon what Russell just said, really paying attention to this issue and trying to get other people to pay attention to this issue is really important. And so if I could say anything to your audience, we would love to have them join the Disclosure Activists on Facebook. And, we're frequently talking about, what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, if there's a press release to be distributed, if we've made a video, if we're trying to get more support for the petition or for our GoFundMe campaign or what have you. People can do a lot with their clicks, as I say. So if there are people in your audience who are interested in disclosure, it's great if they'd be willing to commit. If they have the time, commit a half hour a day and educate yourselves. We have a publication set up on Medium. We have a whole bunch of articles there with links to all of the very best evidence. I'm setting up a YouTube channel as well. We're going to have playlists where people can binge watch, the best documentary evidence out there. And we really need to start changing minds and hearts around this issue. So I would very much encourage anybody who's interested, just go to disclosureactivists.org and you'll see all of the different jumping off points where you can, begin to be an activist in this movement as well.
Michael, can I just add one more point there?
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry for taking up too much time.
No.
Disclosure, PRG, again, they've been around for a while. Disclosure needs a new face or an additional face. They need new blood. They need a new group. And that's really the crux of why we formed this group and where we want to take this. And I truly believe that energy is everything. And if people can all come together and say, you know what, Russ and Lisa, we're with you. We want disclosure too. We really do. Then we must act. Just like the March on Washington for women's rights, just the March on Washington for gay rights, we can do this for disclosure. And so I like Lisa said, and like we've been saying, I welcome everybody to join and support us.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate both of you taking out your time tonight to be with us. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and you're both welcome back anytime. Just send me an email. On top of that, the archive will be available for everybody. I'll send you a link, and I will put all your links within our archive over on our website, latenightinthemidlands.com, too. So I thank you, and I'm pulling for you. So I hope we can get disclosure, and I appreciate all that you're doing to get it.
And it's a privilege and an opportunity that we didn't want to pass up. So thank you very much. Thank you to your listeners for taking their time to listen to us talk about such an important and the most important issue ever in humankind. So thank you very much.
All right.
Yes, Michael, it's been a great show. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
It has. Thank you. I appreciate you being here, and definitely stay in touch. We'll have to do this again. There's so much more. Hopefully we could be talking about the disclosure the next time.
Ditto, my friend. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks. There they go. Russ and Lisa are linked up on latenightinthemidlands.com. Picture slider, schedule page. They're doing some really good work. And, and this just shows, people, if we all focus, if we all get on the same page for a purpose that is something that would benefit maybe all mankind rather than just a few or just a country or two. I think this is big. I mean, something like disclosure, of course. I mean, why can't we all come together on something like that? Because I guarantee you this, let disclosure come out, and a lot of these petty things that people are fighting about today will be yesterday's news. You won't hear much about a lot of those things for a long time, probably, if at all. So it's time that we start thinking, as I don't know, start getting smart about all this. And so, yeah, I'd love to see some marches for disclosure. I'd even get involved in something like that. Absolutely. So, great show tonight. I do appreciate the guests being here.
There's a ton of evidence. What do you mean? What's the problem? Well, it hasn't been scientifically proven. And I say, well, what do you mean? I mean, there have been, documented, radar tracking situations. You have these incredibly professional, incredible witnesses who are pilots and astronauts and members of the military and government who have no incentive to ruin their careers by, starting to insist, that they've had encounters or sightings. And yet they do. And then you have, all of these other, bodies of evidence as well. So I spent a bit of time trying to unpack this with a bunch of people, and I finally figured out what the problem is. The problem is the fundamental foundation of hard science, which is based on the scientific method. So let me tell you what the scientific method requires. Okay. The scientific method requires that a phenomenon be observable, right? So that means it needs to be observable by our 5 primary senses, because those are the only senses that we recognize as being valid in the rational objective worldview, even though there are people who have what you might call sixth senses or other senses, or able to perceive, like me as an experiencer, extra dimensional realities in addition to the reality of the current dimension that we're in. The other thing about the scientific method is it demands that you are able to create experimental conditions so that a phenomenon can be evaluated empirically. So empirically basically means experimentally. Well, in order to create an experiment around something so that you can ascertain whether a phenomenon, let's say the apple falling on Newton's head in the day, finding that that is observable, that it's predictable, it will always happen the same way, that it's repeatable, that when you set up an experiment, you can run the experiment over and over and over again and always get the same results. And various other things that satisfy the scientific method. But if we can't control the experiments, we can't satisfy that hard science rational worldview. And that's the problem that I refer to as the scientific truth embargo, which is basically that there is this truth, there is this body of evidence, but that body of evidence is in Cuba, like Russell said, and there isn't anything to see in Cuba. There's nothing to see there. You don't want to go there. By the way, you're not allowed to go there, but all of this contributes to this sensibility around all of these questions of, paranormal events and, UFOs and UAPs and the crop circles and these channeled messages and people's subjective spiritual experiences, people who experience God in some way or experience angels in some way. And it's become a topic that demands ridicule, because it's become a taboo in our culture to discuss these things, because we privilege hard scientific thinking. Now, interestingly enough, if you move into realms, say, out of chemistry and biology and some of those traditional scientific silos, if you move into theoretical physics, we start working in a completely different world where they aren't able to observe quantum phenomena for the most part. They do conduct some experiments and they build, the Large Hadron Collider and, all these various technologies to sort of work on these hypotheses they've come from. But most of the knowledge in theoretical physics simply comes from math. And math is one of the universal languages. So when you start looking at crop circles and other things where there are actual messages in, these beautiful geometrical formations, there's math at their foundation. And right. That is one of the major ways that ET, or I call them ETs or extra dimensional beings, are communicating with us at this point.
Right. And people keep saying, they're waiting for, contact for communication. We've been getting messages for a long time. It's just people choose to ignore it.
People choose to ignore it because they're told to ignore it. They're told to ignore it, that it's pseudoscience, that it's unproven, that this thing or that thing has been debunked, despite all of the evidence that's come out, photographic evidence and video evidence that's come out, let's say over the last decade, since, cameras and smartphones have become ubiquitous. We have sightings like the Dome of the Rock sighting in Jerusalem a couple of years ago. Was amazing sighting, right? With a craft that was behaving in extremely strange ways. And there were 6 different witnesses, at least, who collected, photographic and video evidence about it. And I mean, you look at that video, you can go on YouTube now and look at it, and that craft is behaving very strangely. But because, it's possible in this day and age to Photoshop images, because CG, is widely employed in Hollywood and is also possible, the skeptics just start saying, well, you could Photoshop it, so that means it's not real.
Well, and here's the thing: we're in today's society, the way technology is today, they've got to know this too, and they being whoever's keeping these secrets, that eventually they're going to have to come clean, because it's only a matter of time before something happens, something's captured that cannot be denied, and I think that that's already happened. But I mean, to an extent where the entire world pays attention to it.
Well, I think what that's going to take, and it's widely rumored, and I will say that the team that I am in telepathic communication with has said this as well, that there are going to be some mass sightings coming up within the next few months that are going to make it impossible for humanity to ignore this phenomenon.
How will we know that? Because some people bring up the whole hologram thing. How are we going to know it's not some fake government-imposed deal? On top of being the real ETs. And this is, and some people bring up that concern. Me personally, I'm going to chill out in a lounge chair and watch until whatever happens. I'm not going to run. I'm not afraid of this. I'm all for it. I want contact. I want us to know. So, but anyway.
Well, my rule of thumb, and Russell addressed this earlier, that there are reverse engineered alien craft. My rule of thumb is that if the craft is metallic and it is clearly visible in our normal light spectrum, in our normal reality, there's a good possibility that it's actually one of ours. A lot of the beings that are basically in position but waiting for more direct interaction and indeed an intervention with humanity aren't currently in our dimensional reality. But they're very close. There's sort of like a veil. And so there's a dimension basically right next door, or a parallel universe right next door, where these beings reside. And their ships are what are called light ships. And
I've seen a light ship.
You might have seen a light ship. We do. And so we see those artifacts as they bleed across that dimensional veil. And so that's going to be the way we're going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, if a bunch of metallic ships, or even those big triangular ships like the one over Phoenix, the Phoenix Lights ship, if a bunch of those show up, then I think we could be concerned about cosmic false flag events.
I have seen a triangle. I have seen the metallic old Jetson type UFO looking thing, the flying saucer, if you will, and I've seen the light where, this one incredible one that I seen was, the light was so, it was perfect, and it was with, captured within itself. None of the light was shining on anything. It's like you had to look up to see it, but it was incredible. But it looked like it was all energy, like all light.
Yeah, no, the light ships require a tremendous amount of free energy, it's essentially 0 point energy.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, in order to be able to shine that brightly. And so, that's sort of my rule of thumb. I'm also, very intuitive, and this group, the Galactic Federation of Light, they're very, very sensitive about humanity's state of consciousness, and they're very concerned about causing mass panic, which is why for the last 20 years or so, at least in earnest, they have been in the midst of this ongoing awareness campaign, which involves all of these sightings, which involves all of these channeled messages, which involves all of these crop formations. They're trying to say, and they have been for quite some time, trying to say, look, we're here, we're benevolent, we're not going to be aggressive, we're